I am not a rocket scientist, although I'd like to be a rock star. And I think that's okay because although technology is a necessary prerequisite, we cannot innovate our way out of this problem. And what Pete asked me to talk about were some of my observations regarding both the personal and the political barriers to achieving the kind of change that we need, as well as the personal and political opportunities that this moment in time presents. So that's what I'm going to do. As he mentioned really quickly, I'm running One Sky, which is a relatively new collaborative campaign in this country. In the last 2 years, we've amassed over 450 allied organizations. We have organizers in every state in the country, and our focus is on delivering bold energy and climate reform. And as many of you are aware, there's a heavy debate going on in Congress right now on that front. So I have some observations to share about what it means to try to move the political process when it comes to these issues. But first of all, barriers. At a personal level, I think there's 4 or 5 key barriers. One is ignorance. For a very long time, we were actually contending with a deliberate disinformation campaign, which created, the strategy was to create confusion about whether or not global warming was in fact happening. And I was a victim of that disinformation campaign. I was happily going about my business in human rights. And it wasn't until I saw what Al Gore had to say in a slideshow at the TED conference that I became acutely aware that what we are in fact facing is a dire planetary emergency with massive human rights implications. And I just dropped everything I was doing and moved on to trying to tackle this. So we're facing ignorance regarding the scope and scale of the problem. We're also facing ignorance regarding the solutions. Because this is such an enormous problem, it becomes overwhelming, and it leads to a second problem at a personal level, which is a sense of helplessness and hopelessness, which I'm sure many of this room, people in this room have dealt with. I've coined it climate trauma. You have a sense that you're living in a parallel universe, that nobody else understands what you understand, nobody else sees what you see, nobody else gets the fact that we're heading straight off a cliff. And it's very debilitating. So the other problem I think we have at a personal level is evolutionary in nature. I don't think as a species we evolved to respond to a threat which is abstract on some level. We're seeing the very real impacts of this threat, but we're a fight or flight species. If there's a tiger straight in front of us, our adrenaline pops up, and we're prepared to respond in whatever way we're capable of doing at that moment. This is a very different kind of a threat than we've ever had to contend with as a species. And we can innovate, but we can't react in the same way that we have to learn how to do. I think there's also a personal or cultural problem with respect to the fact that we have created an entirely disposable culture, most notably here in the United States of America, where we're the #1 per capita emitter. I mean, we as a species here in this country most particularly just throw it away. If any of you have seen the story of stuff, you understand the economy is built around producing and marketing and destroying goods. And there's even planned obsolescence, which is, as I understand it now, a whole theory of marketing that evolved in the 1950s, whereby they move something out onto the market, and just as they move it out, they're planning to make you feel as though it's now obsolete. And iPhones and everything you're dealing with at a technological level is a perfect example of that. So whether it's due to selfishness or laziness or due to the fact that we haven't really comprehended the scope and scale of this problem, we are functioning in ways that we can no longer function in. We can no longer continue to consume the amount of energy and generate the amount of waste that we are generating as a culture. And we have to change our habits. We have to stop eating out of season. We know this. Our frappuccinos, our taxis, our flights to fancy places, everything's got to change. I mean, most scientists indicate that if we do not reduce our carbon footprint as a species by up to 100% by 2050, we will not be able to continue to exist on planet Earth as we know it. That's just absolutely astounding. And we are not going to innovate our way out of that problem. We have to address demand even as we tackle supply, which is what we spent the morning talking about. So some political barriers. Those are just personal barriers. We have not transformed the politics of what is possible to deliver what is necessary. We cannot compromise when it comes to the solutions that we must embrace, and yet we do not have a political system which is prepared to give us what we need. Absolutely not. We have a system which is driven almost entirely by money and by industrial influence. Coal, that's a good word, the two together, coal, oil, natural gas. I mean, the vested interests of the fossil fuel economy have their tentacles deep into the political process, and they outspend us meaning those of us who are advocating for change, by a factor of many hundreds to one. I mean, politicians are reporting right now that for every one call that they're hearing from an environmentalist, there are 10, 50, or 100 coming from opposition. We have the politics of geography, very complex in this country. If you come from a coal state, you want to make sure coal is well attended to. If you come from a wind state, you want to make sure wind's very attended to. So there's very real economic issues here. We have the problem of partisan politics. I was talking to Wes earlier, and he says we're selling our soul to the devil, and the devil's not buying. I think the reality in this country right now is that, and excuse those of you who may come from other political persuasions, we have a deeply divided political process, and we have one party which wants very much to stand in the way of progress by the other party. And I think some of that is driven by purely partisan political agenda, whether it comes to health care or the energy debate. So quickly on possibilities, because that's the main point here. We, notwithstanding everything I said about our personal barriers, we have dramatically transformed on so many levels in terms of our awareness and our behavior as a country and as a globe. I mean, there is so much more understanding than there ever has been. So notwithstanding a lot of the ignorance, we've come a very long way. And people are buying more fuel-efficient cars, they're growing local and buying local, they're reducing, reusing, recycling in record numbers. So that's fantastic. We have a new degree of political engagement in this country. Obama's campaign demonstrated the depths and the possibilities of what we can do, particularly using our other possibility, our cultural possibility, which is online engagement and social networking. So remarkable opportunities there. And our political possibilities, you know, for the first time in history, we have a president who is prepared to lead when it comes to these issues. And we have a dream team in a cabinet who recognize and admit that global warming is a substantial problem, Nobel Prize-winning scientists. And we have the largest Democratic majorities that we've ever had in recent history. Again, this issue falls down along partisan lines. It's very, you know, like you're a Democrat, you're much more likely to vote yes when it comes to energy and climate. Finally, we have a bigger and better funded and better coordinated environmental movement in this country than we have ever had in our history. I'm working in it every day. It's remarkable. The coordination, daily calls around field strategy, daily calls around communication strategy. It's extremely well coordinated, and there's lots more money coming in to support it. We're still outspent, but that's amazing. Polls indicate that a majority of Americans want climate and energy reform. This is good for the ballot box, and we have to do a better job of making that argument. So in closing, because they're shooing me off the stage, notwithstanding the barriers, which are really substantial, I think we have an enormous possibility to get the show on the road in a very meaningful way, and I think that possibility requires both dramatic personal and political change. And I mean, this is just my plea to all of us and to myself to recognize that we can and must do so much more as individuals about this problem. Many of us are dedicating our lives to it, but there is more that we can be doing, whether it's our professional lives, but our personal lives are out of whack. We're not living with the kind of integrity that we can and should, or whether we haven't yet gotten politically engaged. We've never made a call to our senator. We've never urged anybody else to do the same. Just a plea for even more, because it's a heroic task in front of us, and the fate of the earth is in the balance. So, thank you.